strong as a trustworthy family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
All right, everybody, welcome into Bills Weekly here on FingerLakes1.com. Victory Monday. Once again, the Bills handling business in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, 27-25. Paul Russo, Kyle Evans, and Jim Sinicropi here with you as always. Gentlemen, I don't want to do a personal victory lap just yet necessarily about the Ravens, but end up being the Bills kind of resurrecting, obviously, the demons from week 4 against this team. Completely different, as we all kind of said, how it would play out. Weather ends up being a little bit of a factor, just kind of a classic late or midwinter game for football, and ends up being a pretty big victory for the Bills to advance to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't pretty, especially on the Bills side. You know, they allowed them to come back after being up double digits at halftime. But in the end, we see the Chiefs do it every week. They win ugly, and at this time of the year, all that matters is winning, and they did that. So I keep hearing people saying, "Well, Mark Andrews dropped the ball, the Bills caught a break." Well, the Chiefs do that every week. Let the Bills finally have some luck on their side.
Yeah, and it was more than just the Andrews drop ball. I mean, he dropped a couple. Lamar Jackson fumbled, but guess what? The Bills didn't do any of that stuff. They protected the ball. It was a tough matchup for the Bills, obviously, against the Ravens. They got the job done at home, and now they go to Kansas City, where they have a much better matchup and much better history against the Kansas City team. And, you know, I think it's all systems go for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things now where I feel like, especially on the AFC side, the Bills are in the driver's seat. And I think we can maybe get to more of the Chiefs stuff here in a second when we get to more of that game. But, you know, it's kind of funny. Baltimore jumps out to the 7-0 lead, and Nance goes, "Oh, just like last week." I'm like, yeah, like just like every game for the Bills this year, kind of like this first drive feels something out on defense. And then, lo and behold, ends up being completely fine and worthwhile game. Maybe not quite the path the Bills maybe necessarily expected to the ultimate result, but I never really doubted, I don't think, the Bills' ability to close out the game and win it, even if Mark Andrews hauls in that catch for the 2-point conversion there. You're giving the Bills what was it? Pretty much 2 full minutes with timeouts in hand. It's one of those things where I think the Bills probably would have handled business no matter what.
Yeah, I'd like to think so, but you go ahead, Cal.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I agree too. I wasn't really ever too nervous. The wild part is though they only scored 6 points in the second half, and that was from Tyler Bass, who we basically have been doubting a lot. And one was from 51 yards through that, snowy conditions, cold conditions. So I thought he was the unsung hero. I mean, if it wasn't for his also late 21-yard field goal to put him up 8, things could have been different as well.
Yeah, definitely credit to Tyler Bass, but I was getting a little worried. The Bills, you felt kind of needed to score a touchdown on that last drive to put it away, and then they didn't, and then they wasted a timeout to kick the field goal, which at that point, when it got to 4th down, what is there to think about? You go up 8 points. Maybe if it was to go up 6, you go for it, maybe even if it was 7, but that field goal puts you up 8. And so
I think we Might have lost Jim a little bit here.
On third down. Looks down. It's a great play call, but can you hear me?
Yep, there we go. We're back.
All right. I was just saying that I didn't like the play call on third down. I didn't like that they wasted a timeout before they decided they're going to kick the field goal. It was an obvious time to kick a field goal there, to go up 8. And so I was a little worried because the Bills essentially had the game in hand. They couldn't get into the end zone, wasted that timeout. But yeah, they left them a lot of time. But they would have been down. It wouldn't have been tied. So if they happen to have an unlucky break, a turnover, a fumble, the Bills would have lost a game that they had, secured. So it's a great win. They're up against, and they're heading to camp.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting too, because when, again, going back to Nance here for a second, when he brought up the fact that Bass was, I think it was 5 for his last 5 or something like that. I was just like, I looked over at my dad. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Just kind of whatever. But yeah, we kind of had back-to-back nights. And obviously this is not NFC weekly here, but like kind of back-to-back nights of where I was like kind of scratching my head a little bit, because like Dan Campbell kicking the field goal, for example, to cut the lead to where it was, still going to be you needed 2 touchdowns for the Lions at that point. But I'm like sitting there going like, the way you've played all year, it makes no sense to kick the field goal. And I get it from the football side of the Bills, but I'm with you, Jim, on that front, where I think I would have gone for it. Just
I wouldn't have on fourth down. No way.
Oh,
They
you
put
don't?
them up 8.
Yeah.
No.
You don't think so?
And the field goal puts them up 8. You make the team go the full length of the field and get a 2-point conversion. So I didn't like that they wasted the timeout to decide to kick the field goal, because they may have needed that timeout, if the Ravens had converted the 2-point conversion. But no, I wouldn't have gone for it on fourth down. Kick the field goal, go up 8. I didn't like that there was indecision and that they wasted the timeout. I didn't like the play call on third down. Push it right up the middle with Allen, and then if you're a little closer, you go for it on fourth down. But yeah, they won. It got a little shaky at the end, but they won. That's all that matters.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I got a little bit confused there, admittedly. So, all right. Yeah. Can we take a quick second? And now this is where I'll do my personal victory lap on Baltimore, because this is probably the 3rd podcast I've done this on where it's like I've been trying to tell people like the Ravens just in these moments just collapse, and I'm going to do a brief victory lap of like, told you so again, like with the Ravens in this situation. Like I get there's maybe a couple different factors to factor in this time around, but again, to me it's like Harbaugh again kind of outthinking himself. You have Derrick Henry. Why were you trying to punch it in through the air on the 2-point conversion in the first place? Type stuff.
Twice.
Yeah, I will gladly take my victory lap in this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar, I thought obviously, had some good plays in the game, but at the end of the day, he was the guy who turned it over twice, and Allen didn't. And the interception didn't end up hurting him, the Taylor Rapp interception, but obviously the fumble recovery by Von Miller that got him almost inside the red zone. So just those are the type of plays you can't make in these games. And every team that won on this divisional weekend did not turn the ball over. But every team that also won this weekend did not have the most total yards, including the Commanders. The Lions actually outgained them in total yards. But that just goes to show you how big those turnovers. Even the Commanders had a couple, big plays, a pick 6, another interception. So at the end of the day, it's all about the turnovers. And a lot of people used to say, well, Josh Allen can't play clean. He can't, have these back-to-back games in the playoffs where he doesn't turn the ball over. Well, he just did.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. Amazing stat on the Bills. Every single game this year, they've won the turnover margin battle. Every single game. Yep. And, that's hard to believe. And that's a credit to Sean McDermott. as well as Josh Allen, obviously. But that's a culture thing. That's a coaching thing. And it's just hard to believe that they could go the entire season and never lose a turnover battle, turnover margin. And, it happened last night when Lamar dropped that ball and Von Miller picked it up. I mean, that was the difference in the game. That gave the Bills the cushion they needed to, hold on for the rest of the game. The Ravens were playing from behind after that. And it was remarkable that Jackson dropped that ball there, just remarkable.
Yeah, it was crazy in the moment because you had DeMar Hamlin in on that play, and kudos. I know he got some flowers on the broadcast last night, but Matt Milano was pretty much the spy on Lamar for pretty much the whole game last night, and did beyond well. I think there's going to be, through the discourse and my victory lap of the Ravens, as I'm going to call it, is kind of the perfect example of it. Is like there's going to be a lot of talk about Baltimore in this case and not enough love, I think, where it is justified for this Bills defense as a whole again. And specifically some of those guys, like I said, like Milano, who was the spy and did a really great job of pretty much containing Lamar all night. I mean, for better or worse, Lamar had, let's see here, they're giving him 6 carries, 39 yards. I mean, that's in a long of 16. I mean, there's a lot of teams throughout the year, I bet they wish they were able to do that to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens.
Yeah, it was another example of the Bills defense coming up bigger than they are expected to on paper. I don't know if I'd call them the unsung heroes of the season, but this Bills defense is the reason they're here every bit as much as Josh Allen. I mean, it's been just an amazing season, a next man up type of deal, and opportunistic. Bernard punching out that fumble. I mean, these are the plays that have the Bills in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I doubt we're going to hear any credit towards the Bills defense today all over the talk shows. But the wild thing is, Derrick Henry ran for 199 yards in the first meeting. They put up 35 points. This game he had 84 yards. And they didn't put up the points. They turned the ball over when it mattered most, and we won't hear that today. No one wants to ever give the Bills credit, especially defensively. But I think the Bills definitely deserve credit and are a big reason why they're advancing.
Yeah,
it's just interesting to me, watching the Ravens all year that they run Justice Hill in there for entire drives. So that final drive of the game last night for the Ravens, where they're going to be passing and trying to move the ball downfield quickly. Derrick Henry's not even on the field; it's all Justice Hill, and to me, that just takes a lot of pressure off the defense because there was enough time when the Ravens got the ball at the end there to give the ball to Henry on the ground a few times, and he wasn't even in there, so he obviously didn't get the ball in the 2-point conversion attempt. Which I didn't necessarily expect him to, but he wasn't even in there, so the Bills didn't even have to worry about that. So it's just it's strange with the season on the line for them to have their best running back, one of the Hall of Fame running back on the bench for the entire drive.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have Justice Hill in there, not to be, armchair expert on this, but like, if I see Justice Hill in the backfield, I feel like you're probably going to be passing the ball. Right. And
right.
you can plan for that element of it. And the crazy part about it, right, is it's Justice Hill on the ground yesterday. He had less yardage than Derrick Henry. I mean, he had 34 less yards. Hill had 50, but he had the longest. He actually had the Ravens' best average per carry. It's kind of crazy to think that Justice Hill felt like they're number one in what ends up being their last game of the year.
Yeah, well, they must have just remembered that week 4 matchup when he led the receivers in yards, and they thought he could repeat that. But as we always talked about all last week, even off air, this game wasn't going to be anything like the week 4 game. It was so annoying while all week the national media just slobbered all over that game and talked about how the Bills couldn't stop Derrick Henry. Well, the Ravens didn't even use Derrick Henry in the biggest moments. That's the funny part. And if you look at the stats and everything, the Bills were doubled up in total yardage and outgained in almost every offensive category. but they didn't turn the ball over. We keep mentioning that, and that was the key.
It was pretty funny. I tend to not personally right after do any like watching of like post game stuff and anything like that, but um it was funny. I don't know who was asking the questions, but I left it on. I think it was like Spectrum News or whatever station it was, and Ed Oliver was walking out of the locker room and he was talking to reporters, and he was just like, "Who was talking about what all week? Was it you? Was it you?" I'm like, "Oh boy, they had it as bulletin board material all week, for frankly that moment of, and Josh Allen I thought said it kind of perfectly in the moment where it's like, yeah, tonight we're gonna do whatever, but come this morning, well, what would tomorrow morning, this morning now, it's back to the grind of getting ready for next weekend.
Yeah, I loved how he had pretty raw emotions sort of after the game on the field with Tracy Wolfson. You usually don't hear him kind of talk like that. He said we heard the outside noise. We heard that, we weren't big enough to stop Derrick Henry. And, they didn't totally stop him, and nobody's ever going to totally stop him. Especially that third quarter, he really came to life. But overall, again, we talked about it a lot. You look at the defense of who they have, who's out there, the guys that came back from injury, and you can't be more pleased with how they performed against a team that literally led in so many offensive categories.
Yeah. Quick note here for people. We lost Jim. He'd been having a little bit of connectivity issues, so we're going to maybe try and get him back in here in just a second. If not, it'll just be me and you, Kyle, carrying the rest of the way here. So um, let's. I guess at this point we can now look ahead to this Kansas City matchup, AFC Championship game. Um, the CBS crew very poignantly reminds everybody that this is the quintessential matchup that typically wraps up the FC side of the calendar the past better part of what, 6 years now, 5 years now. So um, we get the culmination of this again. Interesting, another rematch here, much like the FC title game. And this time around, going back to maybe a little bit from last week again here, be interesting to kind of see the discourse this week, what the conversation's like, because um, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of pro Kansas City, as I'm going to call it, discussion. Uh, Again, I go back to the same point I had about Baltimore. I don't understand fully where it's coming from. Like, yes, best record in the NFL. I get all that. They're undefeated at home. But uh, Kansas City, again, in that game against Houston, for me personally, and I'm sure it's probably the same for you at this point, Kyle, in all honesty, left a lot to be desired on offense. And yeah, they moved the ball pretty well for the most part in that Texans game, but again, they have this issue of kind of maybe punching this thing home and everything, right? I mean, look, this is a Kansas City team where if you were to tell me even at some points last year that yeah, they'd be winning all these games like the way they are, I wouldn't be surprised. But where you would probably surprise me is the fact that like, yeah, they just only score like 23 points a game, right? And it's one of those things where I'm looking at this, and frankly, maybe to look ahead already to like the gambling lines and everything. Kansas City opened as a point favorite. It's already at a point and a half now, instead on the line, and the over under is 48 and a half. So they're kind of, I think the books are kind of buying into this element of like, okay, we know what Kansas City's going to bring. It's going to be the Buffalo offense, maybe doing a lot of that scoring. It's just interesting to me that the Bills the Bills beat them this year, and the general public appears to be more on the Kansas City side. The interesting part here is looking at the analytic thing here. Buffalo has according to the ESPN matchup predictor, a 54.6% chance to win. So something's not quite adding up there in that sense. Again, much like the Baltimore thing, I don't get it. I think the Bills should be the ones favorited here. I don't know if I'm missing something, but I don't understand how the Bills could be an underdog in this matchup.
Yeah, I think what people are going to base it off from all week is the past history. Allen being 0-3 against them in the playoffs, it being at Arrowhead where they haven't lost. But I don't know. That obviously you're not a Bill, like you watch the Bills and you cover them, but you're not a huge Bills fan. But to me, this Chiefs team is way different than the past.
Yeah.
This Bills team is way different than the past. And, I'm not going to go and say this is going to be easy and, they're going to blow out KC. But I think I feel more confident than I ever have. I think those Tyreek Hill teams, when they were just explosive on offense, scared me more than this team. If this team scores 23 like they did against the Texans, I think the Bills have a legit shot at winning this game. I mean, they beat them 30-21 back in late November. They've had a lot of success in the regular season against them. What are they? They're 4-1 against the Chiefs in the regular season and 0-3 in the playoffs. So they just gotta have their defense come around in the playoffs. That's what's always killed them. Their offense never has a problem scoring. So if they can maybe hold KC to that 23-point mark, I think they have a legit shot at going into Arrowhead and winning that game.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it a couple different times on here, and I know I have anyway. And this would have gone for any team in this spot. This is not exclusive to the Buffalo Bills in this sense. But like, if you're gonna get one on the Kansas City Chiefs, this year's got to be the year.
Yeah.
Because again, I understand what their record is, right? At the end of the day, they're winning games. But like you said, it's very clearly a different, we'll call it, Kansas City team, and not for the better. Like, this is very clearly in this run that they've had. This is very clearly the worst team that they have in terms of actual personnel, in terms of what we'll call this, like, the actual statistical side of things outside of the record. This is the worst team that they've had. And if it's and this goes back to maybe again a little bit like what we talked about in the past couple of weeks, man. If the Bills or any team, like I said, if they can't get it done this year, then man, dude, I don't know. I don't know how teams would kind of continue on a path in the AFC, kind of living with what the Chiefs have kind of done here now in the past, frankly, decade.
Yeah, it's their fourth meeting in 5 years. It's their second AFC Championship meeting. The Bills haven't ever been able to get over the hump. That's always the talk every offseason. How are they going to beat Kansas City? I think this is the year that they have to finally get over that hump. Because if they don't, I really don't think they ever will. And like I said, the problem and the focus all week should be their defense. The Sean McDermott defense against KC in KC is always the problem. They're averaging 35 points per game allowed in the playoffs and only 20 points per game allowed in the regular season. So it's a 15-point difference when it comes to the playoffs. So, you always hear too all week, well, the Bills have Josh Allen on their side. Yeah, that's great, but Josh Allen, there's times this year, even against the Rams, where he's been perfect and the defense has still let them down. So to me, it's all on the defense. If the defense can finally just, like I said, hold them maybe around the 23-point mark or less, I think they're in good shape.
Yeah. One thing that I kind of forgot to bring up about the Ravens game that we can kind of bring up now because it does have some potential, whatever, here for the Kansas City game. Now, main issue here, right, Kyle, is we talk on Mondays, tend to not get the injury report initially until at the very least sometime this afternoon on the early end of things, typically more so on the official side of things, that ends up being Tuesdays. Taylor Rapp ends up injuring his hip yesterday after that interception. Walked to the sideline. We'll call it on his own power, even though it's whatever. But ends up having to be carted into the locker room, was out. And this is kind of like one of those things where it's like, damn, like they keep getting dinged up. Now, the positive end of this, right, is he would be the only guy in the secondary that we have a true injury designation with right now. So it's not like the worst pill to swallow, right? But this is a guy who has really forged a pretty good path into that starting lineup that we've talked about on the defensive side. And, for better or worse, has become one of the, in my mind, maybe he's not like the top flight, like safety or anything like this in the NFL, but he's forged a pretty good path as being on like maybe that next tier, at least this season, of guys who, makes a difference clearly, right? And, hopefully he's going to be good to go. But you're dealing with a hip, and the fact that he was carted off, man, it doesn't give me a lot of hope for the title game.
Yeah, the last 2 years, he's a veteran player. He knows the system now as best as he's ever known it. He makes big plays. I know that Lamar Jackson throw was awful when he threw that interception, but still Taylor Rapp gets credit for the interception, so that was a huge play in that moment. And yeah, he couldn't put any weight on the hip. I heard on the broadcast the last update he was going for X-rays. Of course, we don't know what the results are yet. But my guess is even if, nothing's broke, I mean, that's a badly bruised hip. How are you going to move? And it's only going to get worse the day after. One other note, quick though, too. Taron Johnson, I'm sure you remember the play,
Oh, right. Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of got his shoulder caught. He missed several plays, did come back. But again, it's the day after. The adrenaline's probably worn off. You wonder if that's going to be maybe an issue, at least in practice all week. But, it's the AFC Championship. He's a veteran as well. I would hope that he would try to play through that.
Yeah, I hate phrasing it this way. I kind of thought when I saw that happen, I'm like, oh, they're gonna, because it's the playoffs, pop that thing back in, and
Yeah.
not to be morbid about it, but that tends to be the thing that always happens. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So yeah, it's interesting though. Just looking at this, and the guys, he hasn't been named recently, but Balin Spector has an estimated return date of this weekend pretty conveniently. I don't know if we'll fully see anything there because mum's the word on him, but obviously it's positionally not the same, but that would be a nice little at least come back in for a title game if that were the case.
Yeah, the Chiefs also have an interesting move too. I thought about this last night. And it's noteworthy because he's made a couple dumb plays against the Bills. McCole Hardman has to
Yeah.
be activated by tomorrow at 4 p.m. And if not, of course, the season will be over. He won't be eligible for a Super Bowl, potential Super Bowl. So yeah, the Bills and Chiefs both have a couple of moves they could make.
Yeah. So a lot to be looking for on that front. Yeah, looking at least at the moment, weather-wise, and obviously it's always tough being this far out. 34 degrees. Looks like it's supposed to be clear enough that we won't see anything quite like yesterday's games on either side. Um, but obviously this is the later of the two games next week. It's a 6:30 kickoff. Obviously that 34-degree mark probably going to be a little bit cooler than that. Um, one of those things where, and we talked about this even last year, I remember. I don't view this as being a big deal for the Bills, squarely because, right? I mean, they're playing off the shores of Lake Erie. This is going to be pretty much nothing to them in that sense. Um, I do say I'm of what feels like probably a hair of a minority at this point, where it's like, still though, colder weather, even if there is some precipitation, not that it truly evens things out, right? But tends to maybe allow things to get a little bit more chaotic if something were to happen. We didn't necessarily see that in the Bills game necessarily because obviously it was pretty much the Ravens exclusively on the turnover side of things, but we did see that in the Ravens and Eagles game yesterday though. More so maybe the Rams and the Eagles, but let's not ignore the fact that Jalen Hurts coughed a couple up and almost cost the Eagles. So there's something to monitor there. I don't think it's going to be, like I said, it's looking like it's supposed to be clear right now for the game. So I can't imagine we'll see anything crazy there. But, classic football weather for those people who enjoy saying it that way.
Yeah, and I really am hoping nothing impacts the game in terms of weather. Because I mean that Eagles Rams game, yes, it's cool to see the snow falling in the field. But in the end, guys are slipping and that's not real football.
Yeah.
Like they're not able to run routes without slipping. I mean, like I don't know. I guess in the biggest of games, I'm not really a fan that it impacts the game.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it, period. I mean, I played in one snow game for football, and I also played in one for baseball, and it's just not. The guys can say that they're having fun in the moment. I can tell you this: I remember playing those games. I hated every moment of it. But yeah, I can't imagine there's a great taste in the mouths of, to be fair, Baltimore or Los Angeles right now, knowing obviously it was worse in Philly, but knowing that the weather maybe had more of a factor in season deciding game than you initially wanted it to be. So I am with you there 100%. All right. I don't think I'm really missing too much. I mean, obviously these teams met earlier this year, not the beginning of the year. And Buffalo won, obviously in Buffalo. Um, and it seems like, and this is again because we talk on Monday mornings about this, seemed like to me anyway, the headspace that the team's already in and Sean McDermott is already in is pretty indicative of how they're feeling about the week, which is we're going to try and have a different mentality going into this one than the years past in these matchups, which I think is pretty big, right? I mean, hell, we even talk about it on here still every now and then about the whole entire 13-second deal. And it's one of those things where I feel like you haven't had that talk at all this year about that for what it's worth. It seems like the page has turned and they feel like this is legitimately a fresh page in this era of NFL football. And I think that's big for the Bills, more so than anything in my mind, maybe even on the field. It's just the mentality of knowing they can go out there and, maybe there's an element of like, yeah, Kansas City people probably feel like, okay, here we go again. And maybe that kind of helps a little bit in that sense where it's like I personally don't like the full mantra every now and then of nothing to lose, but like if you're the Bills, frankly, right? If people are already writing Kansas City into next week because here they are again, like if you're the Bills, like maybe you do have nothing to lose in that sense. Now I don't feel that way personally, and I don't think that's the way that they feel it anyway. But if you can just keep getting more and more stuff on your side to carry into a game, like why not use that as ammunition?
Yeah, and they've thrived as the quote underdog role, forever, as long as I can remember, except for the drought years, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think also, like I said, their fourth meeting in 5 years in the postseason. I think, most of those games being in Arrowhead, the experience of the loud crowd, the tough atmosphere that everyone talks about. Um, they've also gained years of experience in the NFL wise. So I just think emotionally, they should be good. Now it comes down to can they execute against that tough KC defense, which I said earlier, I think they will. I think it's the matchup that you watch is the Bills defense versus the KC offense. And yeah, again, I feel pretty good. I think I'm on the similar path with you, and you're not even a Bills fan.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think all week we're also going to hear that they're just going to pencil the Chiefs in because of their track record, and I hate that. The game's got to be played.
And that's the thing too, right? Like I understand the pencil again element just because like look, and this speaks more volumes maybe to me in my lifetime than you, Kyle, necessarily, but like you think about the AFC here in the past, we'll be generous. We will call it 25 years, right? It's been outside of literally 2 years of Baltimore. It's been Brady, it's been Manning, and I guess to be fair too, in the similar sense, like Roethlisberger's in there, sprinkled in a couple times, but it's Brady, it's Manning, and then it's been Mahomes, right? As opposed on the NFC side where it's just like peppering of everybody, it's been three quarterbacks, three teams for the most part. And I can understand why people would do that. Look, I'm not going to run away from it. I kind of fell in that regard, especially on the Patriots side of things, right? Like, but until proven otherwise, why not? But more so, I think, than even those end of those Brady years in New England, I feel very much so that this is the time that the Chiefs don't make it. I just feel like Buffalo, maybe it's not exactly team of destiny type deal, right? But like it's the smallest things where it's like this Kansas City team is clearly, and if you deny it, I will fight you to the end of the world on this one. This is a very clearly not as good Kansas City team. There's just no way around it. I don't care what the record says. It's the smallest things where it's like clearly you can tell this is not as good a team as last year, the year before, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, their average margin of victory show that their explosiveness on offense isn't what it used to be when, like I said earlier, when the Tyreek Hill was there. Yes, they are good defensively. They have a great defensive coordinator. They dial up a lot of different stuff. Chris Jones is a beast. Their secondary, Trent McDuffie, stuff, guys like that. They're good. But we've also seen them this year give up points to better teams. And they are if one ball rolls the wrong way or one thing goes the wrong way in a spot, they could have several more losses. We talked about that all year. So yes, the record is 16-2 technically because they just won their playoff game. If you add them all up, they've only lost two all year, and one of them, their starters wasn't playing. So it looks like, oh my God, this team is unbeatable. But when you actually see the game and you watch the game, you know the team's beatable.
Yeah. So I think if that in mind, Kyle, we can get into prediction time. Do you have what you have written down for you? So that way I can
Yeah.
just run into it the same way as we usually do here.
Yep.
All right. Um, I do think the Bills get it done. This is the year. I think they punch. Look, they punch the down team statistically when they're able to here. So I'm gonna go Buffalo 25, the Chiefs 19. They get it done.
Yeah. I wrote this down last night. I'm gonna roll with 27-24.
Ooh,
Because it's a KC game, so it's got to
true.
be very
Yeah,
tight.
yeah,
Uh, don't really know what's going to happen in this game. Just hopefully the Bills make enough plays.
yeah. I think they do get it done, and hopefully when we reconvene, no matter what, next Monday morning, we aren't talking obviously about what the plan is for the off season. We get to talk about what the game was, and then talk about how we'll be back again the Monday after to preview a Super Bowl. It'd be pretty nice.
Yeah, and I think a Bill or another Bills loss to the Chiefs and this round again and just, one win away would just be absolutely devastating. Because like we just talked about, I mean, if they can't do it this year, when will they ever? And you know, we Bills, us Bills fans haven't, especially me, I've never experienced in my lifetime even seeing them appear in a Super Bowl. And I know it's not easy to get there, and I know a lot of teams haven't even made it. Um, but the Bills went through that drought year. I think they deserve some success and at least a Super Bowl appearance.
Yeah. Even not on the fan side of things here, but you talk about from maybe like a team perspective. If they lose like again, then you better get some sports psychiatrists on the line. I think at that point because, and I don't mean that like jokingly, right? Because there does become an element I think for some teams and players. I mean, we've seen it in other sports. I mean, how I even watched a video. Now we've talked about it on here every now and then, but like I'm a NASCAR fan. I was watching a video about a driver who some people might know, Carl Edwards, who just kind of continuously lost and came in second place all the time. It kind of just, frankly, just finally beat him into like literally retirement, like early retirement. Like he was just kind of done. And I'm just like sitting there going like, I haven't done a lot of winning in my life, but I also haven't done a lot of like second place losing in my life. I can't imagine just continuously being as close to that point and then just like not capitalizing on it and what that must really do to you. I think for the psyche of a lot of guys, man, it would be huge for the Bills to just beat the Chiefs in that spot and then just have the opportunity to play in the Super Bowl and win it. It'd be pretty big. I mean, Sean McDermott talked about it in the post-game presser yesterday, right? I mean, not even national media, but like regional media, specifically in Baltimore, was talking about how like Buffalo's not a winning city or anything like that. And sure, maybe I understand that mantra, but like McDermott's right, man. There's just nothing but like tough people, hardworking people. And if there's a city and a fan base who deserves it, it frankly, in this sense, probably is the Buffalo Bills, right? I mean, they've gotten to this spot now. It's their time to kind of seize it and take it. And what does it take the reins of the means of production or whatever? This is the time to do it.
Yeah, this organization really has, improved significantly since McDermott got there in 2017. Technically they've taken some steps back the last couple of years by not making it back to the AFC Championship, but here they are in a year that, people didn't pick them to win the division. People didn't think they'd be very good. Stephon Diggs, the first year of that, a receiving core that, was talked about all year long. They're here, and I think that's what even would make the storyline even more crazy. And then the whole, well, what did the Ravens have? Seven All-Pro players, and the Bills had one All-Pro player. Well, wouldn't it be cool if Josh Allen got his one All-Pro player to the Super Bowl,
Right.
and the Ravens got knocked out, and the Chiefs got knocked out while in the process? So I think the storylines too, and for Josh Allen's legacy, about getting over the hump and beating two really good teams in the playoffs. I think this is huge.
Yeah, for sure. And we will be back to recap it all next Monday morning at 10 a.m. So looking forward to that. Kyle, appreciate you. I know we had to deal with some technical stuff on multiple fronts here today, but we're able to get it done. So appreciate you. We'll catch up later on the week with you anyway, and then again next Monday morning here on Bills Weekly. So really appreciate everybody for listening in and tuning in. You can like, share, and subscribe on the fingerlakes1.com YouTube channel and all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Amazon Music. Back at it again next Monday morning. Let's go, Buffalo.